Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, constant reader Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by the proud new owner of a slightly damaged gray Mercedes. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
So I'm the Mercedes here?
No, you're the owner of the Mercedes.
I'm the owner of the Mercedes.
I'm joined, as always, by the proud new owner.
I interpreted you as saying I was the Mercedes.
It insults me that you think in these intros, in which I always am respectful and kind to you, you would assume I was calling you a car.
Well, at least I'm the owner.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
Not just the driver.
Yeah, you're the owner post horrible murder is the joke.
I get it.
You bought a car. It really hurts me that I have to explain this whole bit to you. I thought it was pretty transparent on the page.
Well, we're good now, though. So it's fine.
I think we've been doing how many? This is like episode 240.
Uh-huh.
Best intro, I think, right here.
Yeah, I think we finally hit our groove.
This week on the show, it's new book week as we enter our penultimate novel of the Kingslingers project. We're still in the 2010s, Matt, but we're focusing instead on King's selection of crime novels. We're in the crime wave.
Yeah, I'm very happy. I'm very happy to be. I'm very happy to be in the midst of this crime wave.
The novel that I've selected is the first of what will later be dubbed the Bill Hodges trilogy. It's a book called Mr. Mercedes. This week on the show, we will introduce the novel and read the first two. I'll call them chapters. The chapters don't have numbers in this one, Matt. So the first two sections titled Gray Mercedes and Debt Ret. Here we go, Matt. What did you think of your first week with Mr. Mercedes?
Well, first of all, I discovered that this is not a novel about a detective who drives around in a Mercedes. So already defying my expectations. I've really enjoyed it so far. I've been having a lot of fun. I feel like I need to express how much just like joy this brought me, because it's such a good example of the thing that it is.
Yeah.
And like you, and what I mean is like you and I, we both like, detective stories, crime stories, movies, TV shows, books, yeah. like it's just a thing we both like. And this is like King just has it totally dialed in here. Which is not altogether surprising, but also it's just, it hit me really hard how solid this is. It's just like great. I like this book a lot so far. Mm-hmm.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is him kind of intentionally flexing a muscle that we've not specifically seen before, and once again showing that like I'm good at this writing thing, because look, I'm just going to move over here now and I'm going to do your thing, crime authors, and I'm going to do it just as good as you can. I really, really enjoyed this book, and I've really, really liked my first week with it as well. So I'm really, really excited about this whole thing.
Awesome.
Before we get into the book and the section, though, we did have one quick announcement for you folks. Those of you who've been listening for a while probably know we do a monthly book club. We do a live stream discussion on Friday evenings, the last Friday of the month, typically, where we talk about one book a month. This Friday at 9:30 Central Time over on our YouTube page, we will be doing this month's book, which is a novel called The Troop by Nick Cutter. It is a super gross horror novel that came highly recommended from Stephen King. He's got a pull quote on the cover of the book. So I think there's probably some crossover between this podcast and that book. So if you're interested in hanging out with us for an hour or so and talking about this book, come join us on YouTube. Just show up at 9:30 p.m. Central Time and hang out with us. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we're both enjoying the book so far, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, me too. All right, Matt. Crime. Let's talk about crime. Are you pro crime?
I'm in the mood for crime.
So like we said in the introduction, King, I feel like King has always kind of written outside of what a non-King reader would classify as like his his normal genre, like horror. I think he's always done that throughout his career. But I think, crime is a thing that I wanted to focus on specifically enough to like have a whole book about it and section of this final season about it, because it really seems like for the last 15 years or so, this has been like a thing with him. Like he wrote this Bill Hodges trilogy in 3 years, bam, 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 and then he's released more books circling around crime fiction since then, like short stories, books. He's brought back some of the same characters from these things over and over again. It just really seems like, especially at this stage in his career, this thing is almost one of the things that interests him the most. And I thought it would be worth it for us to take the time to really talk about that and digest one of these novels.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, just along the lines of what you said, it feels both new and also comfortable because I think a detective, especially like a good detective, is a sort of gunslinger, and it fits in. That. I think it fits in with that sort of thing that he does, where this archetype crops up in a lot of his stories, but there's a kind of pure form of that archetype and a distinct form of that archetype that is not quite like any of the other, gunslingerly characters that I think is the noir. Not that this is noir exactly, but the hard-boiled detective type.
Yeah, it's noir adjacent, I think.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think that's cool. I don't think I've ever like consciously done the one-to-one gunslinger to hard-boiled detective comparison, but I think it really works. I think you're right. That's kind of what he has to grab onto and dive into this. And I also think it's just like a perfect encapsulation of the idea that King talks about so often, is that if you want to be a writer, you have to be a reader. One of the reasons why he's probably so good at this, not just the fact that he's a very talented writer, is because he reads a shitload. And he really likes to read these kind of crime fiction, hard-boiled detective stories. So he knows a lot about them. And when you know a lot about a genre, when you know how to operate in that genre, you can hit those common beats in the genre while also kind of, playing with them a little bit.
Yeah, exploring.
Yeah. So I think, when we're talking about crime and Stephen King, I think specifically this whole thing to me started back in 2005, where he wrote a short novel called The Colorado Kid for a brand new publishing imprint called Hard Case Crime. The Colorado Kid is not really a crime novel, and it's definitely not like what I traditionally think of as like hard-boiled detective fiction that normally dominates an imprint you'd call hard case crime. But I guess if you're starting like a new publishing imprint and Stephen King says he's going to write a book for you, you just say, okay, write whatever you want. It's fine.
Right. Yeah. Good enough. Does it have a crime in it?
No. Yes. So just like a kind of overview of the novel is, there's this body that shows up on the beach one morning. It's just there's a body there, and nobody knows like who it is or why they were murdered, or if it was even a murder. And which I know right now you're probably saying, hey, that sounds like a hard-boiled detective story, but it's not, because it's not like then we follow the detective and like examine what happened to this kid and how could this have happened. It's just like, hey, there's this body, and then we just like walk around to some characters and see how they react to there being a body there. And that's the book. It's an interesting novel. I don't not like it. And I think it has something really, really interesting to say about what King was dealing with at the time, which was like, what if things don't necessarily have satisfying answers to them? But it's definitely not like crime fiction in the way you would traditionally think of it.
Well, as long as there's a crime, I'm happy.
Yeah, there definitely is. King has also since then published 2 more novels under the Hard Case Crime imprint. He wrote a book called Joyland in 2013 and a novel called Later in 2021. Both good novels. I enjoy them very much, and they're definitely both playing in the crime/mystery genre. But again, not something you'd call like your stereotypical hard-boiled detective crime type novel. That's not what those books were doing. But that's what this book does. That's what the Bill Hodges trilogy does for sure. These are detective crime novels in a very classic sense in a lot of ways. We have in this trilogy this book, Mr. Mercedes, which was released in 2014. The follow-up Finders Keepers came out a year later. And the end of the trilogy, aptly named End of Watch, wrapped everything up in 2016. By the way, Matt, King, the kind of origin of the story is an idea King had after, I think, seeing this news report of a woman driving her car into a McDonald's. And he said, oh, I can make a story of that. And he originally thought of it like a short story, and then it turned into a novel, and then it turned into a trilogy, because this is how Stephen King works.
Okay, that's cool. I didn't know any of that background. That's awesome.
Yeah. But he wasn't done here, Matt, because after this trilogy, he returns both to crime and to these characters with a book called The Outsider in 2018. Then he has a short story, If It Bleeds, in a collection of the same name in 2020, and the novel Holly, which just came out later this year. Or earlier this year, rather. So he, like I said at the beginning, like the reason why we're doing this is because he has decided, whether consciously or subconsciously, and that it's just these are the stories coming to him, that this is a genre he's going to really, really spend some time playing in.
I mean, this is almost as many books as The Dark Tower, and it's the same characters. So like, it's interesting. It's like his other long series, right? I guess until this moment with you explaining to me that all these books are part of the same series, I don't know that I fully understood how many books were in this, obviously, so there's the Bill Hodges trilogy, but then some of these characters are also in other books. So I guess, is there a word that we can use to refer to like all of the crime novels? Or are we just going to call it all of the crime novels?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's not like any. Well, okay, so there is a word. Yeah, I'm just going to spoil this for you and for anyone else listening. There's a character in this novel named Holly Gibney, and Holly Gibney basically becomes the primary character through the series after this novel. That's why, I mean, there's I just told you there's a book called Holly that came out this year that's about Holly Gibney. So she is kind of the most clear through line in all these stories. Every story I just read to you, outside of the hard case crime books, has Holly Gibney in it. So we could just call them the Holly Gibney novels. Okay, easily.
All right. Yeah, not a particular spoiler, because I had heard stuff about him saying like this character Holly kind of jumped off the page and took over the series. So yeah. That's very cool. I think it's funny, we haven't read very much of this novel yet, but I just wanted to say off the bat, like one of the delights of the book so far is that King is really sticking to the prominent tropes of detective fiction, and yet he's somehow making it his own. Like he's making it seem fresh, even though you're like, yeah, that's definitely like a standard trope of detective fiction, but somehow it works here as if it is meant to be here, as if it is organic here. And I think what it is, but my first stab at it, which my thinking on this may evolve, is I mean, it's really simple. It's just that he understands the purpose and the function of the tropes, and like why the tropes work, and how they work dramatically, and why they are popular. And so when he employs them, he's employing them with like an intention and a dramatic end in mind for them. He's not just putting them in because like, yeah, this is how you write hard-boiled detective novels. It's like, no, this is, he understands exactly how it works and why it works. And just there's a lot more surety behind the choices than maybe you typically get in a detective novel. So anyway, that's my first impression, and that's maybe part of the reason why I'm enjoying it so much, is I'm just like, oh, he really understands what he's doing, like perfectly.
Yeah, no, I agree with that entirely. I mean, it was talked about earlier that it's just from his osmosis of reading these books so much, and also his skill at understanding how stories work. But I agree, like, looking through and really thinking about and analyzing this week's reading, it's just like a lot of the stuff is just very basic, feels like a dismissive word, but just like, this is why, just in general, these things are good. Like, you know, Bill breaking down the letter, kind of the playing with the dramatic irony of the things that we as the reader know, but the two characters don't know, like just really basic stuff. in these kind of novels that really make them just fun to read.
Yeah.
And he does it so well. And that's actually one of the reasons that I thought it'd be fun to do a crime novel, Matt, is because my overall feeling about these books is I think they're very good. There's some that I have a little bit more of a mixed opinion of. This one is not that one. I really, really enjoy this one. But also to like investigate them a little bit more, because one of the things that I'm curious about, and one of my kind of central questions of the novel Mr. Mercedes, is like, at the end of this thing, am I just going to go like, this was a really fun book that I really enjoyed, or is this saying something or doing something a bit more complicated than just that? Is it yes, doing these fun things and having fun with it and making a fun story, but is it exploring something deeper? Is it Stephen King noodling on something specifically? Because we've done many books in this series, and we've always kind of managed to find a way to talk at a deep level on what we think the book is saying thematically and psychologically, and perhaps gesturing towards what Stephen King could have been thinking about and pondering and trying to work through as he wrote these books. And this is one where, to be completely honest with you, I did not have a clear idea of that going into these episodes. I don't have like a thing that's in the back of my head, like this is what this book is about. So I'm kind of really anxious and excited to explore that with you and see if we can find anything.
All right. That sounds good. I mean, I think we're probably on the same page that even in the beginning of this book, there are some ideas that he's thrown into the story, which obviously we're going to be tracking to see how they evolve. But yeah, we'll just have to keep that conversation alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I can already see some of the things that I think it's doing. So it's like going into this thing not really knowing, and then in the first week being like, oh yeah, no, I'm picking up on stuff already. That's good. It makes me excited. So all right, so Mr. Mercedes itself, as we said, this book was released in 2014, and as we said, is the first book in the Bill Hodges trilogy of novels the King releases over the next few years. As we said, also, this book is very much operating in that hard-boiled crime genre. The opening of the book actually states, thinking of James, as in James M. Cain, basically one of the largely considered fathers of the hard-boiled crime genre. I don't think he's like the originator of them, but one that like took the genre and really mastered it and made it extremely popular. Actually, the quote in this thing is the opening sentence of Cain's "The postman always rings twice," which I thought I had the quote here, but apparently I messed my script up at some point, Matt. But the quote itself is that opening line, which is, "They threw me off the hay truck about noon," which is this like perfect like jumping into the middle of the action quote that just really sets a story going from there. And King calls that in the very opening of this book. So so I guess it'd be a good idea maybe, Matt, to like, before we get into this book, like to actually talk about, we've said like the phrase hard-boiled crime 16 times so far in the last 10 minutes, but like, what does that actually mean? what is a hard-boiled crime story? So I pulled this from Wikipedia, the world's dictionary. You want to read it for us?
Sure. So Wikipedia, the most reliable source in the world, says the genre's typical protagonist is a detective who battles the violence of organized crime that flourished during Prohibition, 1920 to 1933, and its aftermath, while dealing with a legal system that has become as corrupt as the organized crime itself. Rendered cynical by this cycle of violence, the detectives of hard-boiled fiction are often anti-heroes. Notable hard-boiled detectives include Dick Tracy, Philip Marlowe, Nick Charles, Mike Hammer, Sam Spade, Lou Archer, Slam Bradley, and the Continental Op. I've heard of one of those, so I guess I'm not as knowledgeable about this genre as maybe I thought. But anyway.
Was it? I mean, Dick Tracy, I'm guessing, is the one you've heard of. Yeah. No,
Tracy.
I've heard of Sam Spade, Lou Archer, Philip Marlowe. So I guess reading that summary, I think that's a good one for what hard-boiled is. But the question that is kind of immediately raised for me is like, okay, well, what is noir then? And how is hard-boiled different from noir? And I guess in my opinion, I don't know how you feel about this, but like in my opinion, noir fiction is like everything is bad, everything is corrupt. The line between good and bad has basically all but evaporated. And I think like a hard-boiled detective story still kind of holds up this very clear, this is right and this is wrong. This guy, even if he's kind of an anti-hero because he's a little bit cynical, he still is like a paragon of virtue in a bad world, where I think noir is more like, no, even he's kind of bad actually. Everything's bad. So I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, that sounds right to me. It's funny. I didn't actually look up any of these terms, and for me, it all kind of blends into the same soup of like, okay, we have a lot of the same overlapping tropes between all of these different subgenres of, you know, the detective crime novels.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of them, there's, you know, a private eye, right? But it's like, okay, well, that's a detective, you know. It all blends together. Yeah, I guess I'm just not picky about it too.
I mean, honestly, these terms are used interchangeably so often that there might as well not be a difference in definition, but there technically is, I suppose.
Yeah, it does make me wonder. Probably the one that I've consumed the most of by mass is Law and Order, which I'm not sure if that even qualifies as any of these, but
who knows? Who knows? Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's just sort of an example. Now that I'm thinking about this, I'm realizing how much Law and Order I've actually watched in my life. But it's like the perfect crystallized form of the tropes. Although I wouldn't actually say it's like great. Like there's no one episode of Law and Order where you're like, oh, that's like a must-watch episode of Law and Order. That's genius television. But it's like, yeah, but it's usually competent and it hits the tropes. It understands the beats. So you watch enough Law and Order, you really understand how detective stories are supposed to work.
Sure.
But
yeah, I mean, I think it only matters to make a distinction here in this book, because I do think this is a book which could play in the noir space, does very much feel like something in which there's badness. Like this is a novel that establishes from the very beginning and throughout, at least throughout these two chapters, that like shit's bad all around. Like things are not going well generally, like in the micro and the macro. But I do think our detective here does serve as like despite the fact that he is definitely a little cynical and suicidal when we meet him, as like, oh no, this guy is just like good. He's just like a really good dude. And I think the prologue that we'll get to in a second also demonstrates that in this cynical world of brokenness, there is heroes. There are like good people that are just decent good people, and I think that feels distinct from noir to me.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. Just one note here. You know, I couldn't find where I read this or heard this, but I read recently. Maybe this is only partially true. I don't even know. But I read that it makes a lot of old crime novels, especially like the original ones, like the original noir novels that came out in the 1920s, right?
Yeah.
Kind of make more sense if you consider that a lot of the characters are traumatized war veterans, and like some of the cynicism is coming from the idea that these guys are combat vets who have dealt with a lot of quite awful violence, and that's part of the, you know, the darkness of their lives and what they've been through. And yeah, so just I bring that up here because you brought up like things are bad in this story, but I think that's actually an instance of where King has sort of updated things, where it's not like we're in the shadow of a world war, but we are in the shadow. You know, we're also not in the shadow of the Great Depression, but we are in the shadow of a kind of depression, an economic recession, and the consequences of that. That's an idea that he brings up pretty much immediately. So
yeah, it is such a clever thing to set this in the middle of the Great Recession, or in the immediate aftermath of the Great Recession. Like it is kind of taking those very standard noir hard-boiled settings and then just saying, okay, that, but ours. And then just running with it. I agree. I think it's really cool. The other thing I wanted to talk to you before we get into the story itself, Matt, is I think when you have these kind of murder mystery-esque stories, there's essentially two different paths you can take with the structure of the whole thing. In the first, you, the reader, do not know who does the crime, and you are learning details about the crime and seeing the suspects, and at the same time, the detective is trying to deduce who did this and how. You, the reader, are essentially doing that as well. The other, and then the one that I think we see immediately in this book, is we find out relatively quickly, almost right away, exactly who did the deed. We know who the criminal is. We know what their name is. We know how they did it. We know maybe a little bit of why. And then the fun of the book is watching the detective work towards finding him from our privileged position of knowing both players and kind of seeing the detective cat and mouse game between the detective and the criminal, from that privileged position. And that obviously is how Mr. Mercedes does it. And I'm just curious, before we get into the book, do you have like a preference on which of those two models you like better?
Sort of. So I think aside from Tana French's books, which are generally the former, where you don't know who the murderer is. Aside from those, because I love those, I generally prefer the ones where we follow both the killer and the detective. I think maybe like the best example I can think of, which by the way is not a, a book that I've read, but it's a movie that I've seen, but it would be like Red Dragon. And I say that because Red Dragon is really good about giving both the detective and the killer interesting stories. Which I think is one place where this format can fall down, is like if the killer's story is boring or sort of,
Yeah.
or like we're, if we're just following the killer around as they commit their crimes, like they're the Riddler or something, and it's like there's no actual story to their story. It's like the story is just they're committing murders. That I like less. So I think I'm going to put a big fat depends on this, where it depends on, like, I like it a lot if what we're doing is we're sort of following these two characters who each have their own arc. One of them is detective, one of them is killer. I love that. I love it when that works out really, really nicely in a story.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I think it's fun in that, like, getting to see how they're all like maneuvering around each other is very fun, but I think it is harder, and not to speak badly towards any writer that does the former method. Like, I think it is a little bit harder. I think you're right that it makes it more difficult. You've got to make two characters compelling, and you need the cat and mouse part of it. It's not just, oh, look how good this detective is and look how good he is at figuring stuff out. We also need to see the effectiveness and the intelligence of the bad guy as well, because they're trying to outsmart each other, and we have to make both smart. If we're gonna make a story in which two characters are trying to outsmart each other, oh, well, we got to think of smart things for each of them to do, and that's more difficult. And yeah, I mean, we're very, very early in this book still, but I like it in this book. I do.
Yeah, me too.
All right, let's get into it, Matt. We begin with Gray Mercedes is the name of the section, and this chapter, I guess, essentially serves as the prologue of the book. It doesn't call itself a prologue, but it basically is a prologue. And we see quickly that it's April 2009. We're in the middle of the Great Recession, as you said, and we meet Augie Odenkirk, an out-of-work man heading to the city center job fair, where it has been announced that there will be guaranteed 1,000 available jobs. The fair doesn't open until the morning, but Augie is there at 11 p.m. He's that desperate for a job, and he's not the only one. We see as he finds already there ahead of him are a couple dozen people waiting for jobs. And it's interesting, Matt, that Augie and the desperation of his plight, the economic woes of the late 2000s in America, these things don't like matter. I mean, obviously they do, but not like specifically plot wise matter. It's background, it's flavor, but yet because it is Stephen King, I think it is all really, really richly compelling, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it doesn't matter so far. Like, I think one way in which it sort of maybe matters is, like, we see that the killer has multiple jobs, which is unclear whether he needs multiple jobs or he's just doing it to to blend in, right? But
Mhm.
could be the case that that's part of the commentary is like, I don't know exactly what the commentary is there, but it's like he's part of this system. He's also caught up in it, along with everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely like have the majority of the characters we met in the story so far are working class people, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's the cops themselves or the killer or the people the killer is surrounded with, like all these characters are pretty working class, and we're already kind of drawing a class divide because the owner of the Mercedes is not a working class person, and we see the tension that creates between her and the police officers in this chapter. And
That's a good point.
not this chapter specifically, but in this week's reading, and that, I mean, I think that is intentional for sure.
Yeah, but again, I think we talked about this a second ago, but King has updated the tropes for the modern economic situation, but understood like how they function and how it creates this background of desperation.
Yeah,
Where like I think that's the key way in which it operates, and it is like, why do you set a crime novel in the context of an economic depression? It's like, well, everyone's more desperate, everyone's a little bit more sort of selfish and angry and just hurt, right? And it
yeah,
makes everyone a little bit less trusting and less trustworthy, and these are all qualities of a story that make the drama heightened when you're writing a story about crime, I think.
yeah, and yet the criminal did not do this out of any kind of economic desperation, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
He did it because he thought it was fun,
Yeah.
and that, I think that matters as well. Like it is kind of a examination of the kind of the degradation of the world, and one of those ways is the ways in which the economic system is failing, and the other is the ways in which morality and decency is failing in some ways, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what Brady represents.
Well, and to specifically like nail this in, obviously the target of his crime is this line of people who were lined up like in the middle of the night in order to get a job out of desperation.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't even be there if there weren't this economic crisis. So
Yep.
it's all like it's very central to, it's the reason they're all there, right? So it is all tied together like that.
Yeah. I just love this line in the book talking about this whole thing where Augie's thinking, and he says, 2 years ago, everything had been fine. He hadn't exactly been living large in the hood, but he had been making ends meet with a little left over at the end of most months. Now everything had turned to shit. They had done something to the money. He didn't understand it. I love that line. They had done something to the money. Like, yeah, that's like what happened. Like, I mean, the recession of 2008, which by the way was the year I entered the workforce, and I think same for you, or about or would have been if you had not gone back to school.
Yeah, that's true. I went back to school, but
crazy time, but it was a crazy time in like a very nebulous way where like I don't think I fully understand what happened, what caused it, and why for years after it happened. Because it was just like the whole housing crisis and why the everything failed is so weird. It's totally understandable that just your average person just trying to make ends meet is just like, why? What are you telling me? Why? Like everything seemed fine and now it's not. Why?
Yeah, this all seems fake. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I went back to school because it was so much harder to get a job that it was like, all right, well, maybe I'll go back to school, and then something will open up, and then life took a different course. But anyway, yeah, it was formative, I think, for people our age, right? Like that we all came out in that environment.
Yeah, I mean, I had an internship in the summer of 2007, and did well in my internship, well enough for them to say, okay, you got to go back and finish your last year of school, but once you do that, like, we'll you can come work here. So they gave me an offer after the internship. I signed the offer, went back to school for a year, and then I just remember like watching all this shit happen in my final year of school and being like,
yeah,
am I gonna have a job? Like, just kind of waiting for the email or phone call or something to be like, oh, by the way, we're gonna have to rescind that offer. So fortunately that didn't happen, but definitely on my mind constantly. It was a crazy time sure.
I think that kind of thing happened to a lot of people too.
Oh yeah.
So,
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, the experience of the characters in this story is not an uncommon one, right? Like there was a lot of people, and I love kind of the cynical like 1,000 jobs guaranteed, and Augie knows like that's bullshit, right? Like he just like there's no way there's gonna be 1,000 jobs. Like you get a bunch of people there for there to be 1,000 jobs, so you can have your pick of all these people for the handful of jobs there are.
Yeah.
So we meet Janice, the woman in line just ahead of Augie. She's actually, Matt, got her baby with her and is instantly judged by our point of view character for it, as well as basically everyone else around her. But I think we quickly learn here, Matt, that she doesn't have a choice. Like she has to have her baby there's no one to watch her. She can't afford a sitter. She's in desperate need of a job, but she also has to take care of this child. And I actually think, kind of trying to spot things and ideas here. I think we're doing something here. King takes time here to point out the looks that Janice is getting from everyone around her, the comments that people are saying, the judgment at her poor choice, her poor parenting, just her inability to make decisions. And of course, we kind of see immediately that there was no choice. That like this is just the way it was, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, to a first pass, it's like the thing that's happening here is everyone is judging an individual for something that is a systemic problem, or the consequence of a systemic problem. Like I think Augie is a fantastic point of view character because he's like a very sweet, generous, good-hearted man, and yet his reflexive reaction is like, Jesus, he brought the baby, and we kind of see his thought process, and we understand his thought process because he's like, well, I guess there is nothing else she could have done, but it's almost like he can't accept it.
Yeah.
And there's such an urge. I think this is very human, by the way. Like this is one of those Stephen King things where he recognizes like it's very human to look at somebody who's struggling, and you actually there's an impulse to want to blame them for their own suffering because then it will make sense.
Yeah.
And there will be an intrinsic justice to it. And then you can just kind of put it away because it's like, okay, well, they deserve that. They deserve to suffer, so it's okay.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to feel empathy anymore. But if you can't do that, if it's like, wow, their situation sucks, totally out of their control, I can't actually do anything to help them, this just feels bad now.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, it's just, I think there's something very interesting happening where we're talking about the nature of empathy in a situation where everybody's in pain for reasons that you can't do anything about.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And the ways in which I think it's such an astute comment that you just said there, because it I think outlines the ways in which people are looking at this woman and exactly saying I think Augie says something to the effect of I don't know how this woman's going to get through life if she shows up at this place without the proper, she didn't bring anything to cover the baby besides what she had, and didn't have a sleeping bag, really didn't have a way of changing her, which I just want to say, as a parent, the struggle of being out with a child and then having them have a blowout or something, right? It's just so fucking stressful and relatable. And even if you had the most plans ever, you still sometimes forget stuff. I've had to run and pick up my son early from daycare and take him to the doctor, and I realized as I was walking into the doctor's office that I didn't bring the diaper bag, and I can smell poop, and it's just fuck. This shit happens like this all the time. And his desire to say, I think you're absolutely right to say she's in this situation because she's the type of person that would make those dumb decisions, those dumb lack of foresight, bad decisions. So that's why she's here. And the truth is, at least in this particular event, no, it was just a thing that happened that was largely outside of any of these people's control.
Yeah. And I think the fact that Augie, he has these thoughts, but then he still almost literally gives her the shirt off his back, just speaks to what a great guy he is, and then sets us up to really hate this villain.
Absolutely. And that is great transition. That is what we're doing here. Like essentially, like I think we're doing all this deep, complex stuff about systemic issues, and I think all that's here, but like functionally in the plot of the story, what we're doing is really making us want to hate the Mercedes killer because yeah, like we see Augie give his sleeping bag to Janice in order to let her change and feed her baby. She ends up sleeping in there with her baby and like this guy who this woman is technically his competition, right? They are both competing for a small amount of available jobs, and he doesn't have kids himself, so he can't directly relate to what she's going through. And yet, he helps her. He helps her, and you're absolutely right. What this does functionally is make us immediately love this guy, love these people, and then hate the guy who kills them.
Yep.
I love the line, "Why are you being so kind to us?" And his answer is just because we're here, right? This really really great sentiment of like, you know, when the thing that I've noticed in people that I love so much is that when bad shit really does happen, like I often think people are terrible and stupid and frustrate the hell out of me. But when like really really bad things happen, you see the way people like help each other, like really transparently, and
Yeah.
I just like because we're here is such a great sentiment of that whole idea. Is like because we're all in this situation and we're all in the situation together, and instead of fighting each other, we should be working with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'd like you brought out the idea of when kids are involved, because I've always found it lifts my spirits to see, like, if I've ever been having trouble with any sort of child related thing in public, you can generally expect that people will actually be very understanding and even like jump to help you if necessary, which I don't know, it warms your heart, makes you get a little bit more faith in humanity, because you know people are. I think one unique thing here is that people are naturally judgmental of other adults, because it's like, come on, why don't you have your shit together? But they look at a child and they're like, oh, that's a child, that
Yeah.
the rules don't apply. And then I think you see something more like, well, that's their natural humanity. It's kind of been numbed out of them by life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I mean, I've had situations where like I was juggling my two children in bags and stuff, and had just random strangers walk up and like ask if they can help us. Like that's yeah, like people, especially like children, are this like great incentivizer of kindness almost.
Yeah, even just, you know, very subtle things like holding doors when you're obviously, you know, got your hands full and stuff. Yeah.
We had when we went to Maine, like we were there for a week, and we have me, my wife, and two children, and all like the thousands of pieces of shit you need for a infant. And we were just like, we checked 3 bags, but like the problem of getting from the parking lot to the bag check and then getting back from the bag check back to the parking lot, like that, when we had all the bags and just the 2 of us and 2 kids, like completely overwhelmed. And this random guy just saw us and just grabbed 2 of our bags and just walked with us the 7-minute walk all the way to the car.
Wow. Yeah.
To help us. Like, that's incredible. That's people, man. It's great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And then there's Brady Hartsfield on the other side of this thing.
Yeah, there's those out there too, for sure.
Yeah. So as Augie watches Janice and her daughter sleeping in the sleeping bag, he thinks about Rose of Sharon from The Grapes of Wrath, a character who starts the novel as probably, I think you could say, like one of the least likable, most annoying characters in the book. But eventually, like, I think her big kind of concluding moment in the story is that she feeds a starving man the milk from her breast. And you know, I think he looks at Janice breastfeeding her daughter and makes that mental connection. But I think metaphorically, it's kind of Augie that's essentially the Rose of Sharon in this particular instance, right? He's sacrificing his sleeping bag. He's giving something of his up for the benefit of other. So I think that's true.
I like that idea. I think the idea also crossed my mind that, you know, he's giving up something for her and she's giving up something for her daughter. And this is kind of the web of humanity, as we're all constantly giving things to each other. And it's just this this cycle of love and giving. And I think, as you said, then into this beautiful moment smashes this evil,
Yeah.
which is a very, Stephen King idea, actually.
Yeah, just breaking the goodness and central humanity of this whole thing, destroying it, which feels like a violation of the greatest kind. Yeah. Augie also mentions that Rose of Sharon is a biblical reference, which I just want to say, Matt, in our continuing Bible study, it comes from Songs of Solomon, which the Bible, Matt, is an interesting book. It has lots of things in it, lots of different things. It has, like imparting of wisdom, teaching people the rules of God and the world. It teaches people, like it uses parable and story to impart morality and wisdom. It also has the Songs of Solomon, which are just like poems about like two horny people talking about fucking each other.
Excellent. So it's got horniness. we got horny Bible references, which is like we're mixing together King's two favorite things: horniness and Bible references. So
yeah,
it's perfect.
Yeah. Like, look at this. Look at this. The bride says, "I am the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valleys." And the groom says, "Like a lily among the thorns, so is my darling among the young women." And then she says, "Like an apple tree amongst the trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the young men. In his shade I took great delight and sat down, and his fruit was sweet to my taste." Get it?
Yeah.
Get it?
That's right. That's right.
I'm exaggerating a little bit here, Matt, but essentially that's what the Songs of Solomon are. It's just like, it's not specifically trying to impart any biblical code or like wisdom on the nature of God. And it's just, these people love each other a lot and they're talking to each other and they're just fucking. It's like, they're just fucking.
I don't know. Like, I feel like the sort of like cultural prudishness around sexuality is pretty historically recent. I don't actually know if that's true, but I mean, okay, let me not be ridiculous. Like, obviously we had some very strict, like, and explicitly, misogynistic codes about sex. But I think the specific modern brand of never talking about sex, I don't think that was around back when they wrote the Bible. So it doesn't surprise me that much.
Yeah, that's great. Songs of Solomon. Read them. They're fun. At 5 a.m., the sun starts to rise, and the janitorial crew shows up at the city center, which causes everyone that's been standing there all night to cry out in joy. I love this moment. It says, "Life is discovered on another planet," shouted one of the young men who had been staring at Janice Cray. This was Keith Frias, whose left arm would shortly be torn from his body. This, Matt, I think, is our first textual indication that something bad is about to happen here. I'm curious if you suspected this prior to this moment. I mean, it is a crime novel, so one would assume that there would be some sort of crime occurring in the opening of it. But did you suspect this before this moment?
Not exactly. Well, so what I suspected was that one of the characters that we were meeting would be killed. I felt like probably the woman, the nursing woman would be killed. But not like immediately, not like in this scene. Like, I felt like we were going to get to know her, and then she was going to be murdered, and that would be the murder victim that we would, because I was like, okay, I feel my empathy circuits being triggered for this woman, and it doesn't feel like somebody we're going to know for very long. In short, did not anticipate that like all of these characters were going to be killed like immediately. So,
well, I mean, you got it half right. She definitely did die, and her poor baby. Yep. So it's right about this time that our gray Mercedes shows up. Speaking of like class divides and differences, I think as you pointed out, let's just hammer this in once again. Like, it is not a working man's car that shows up and plows into these people and guns them down. It is a very, very expensive luxury vehicle that does this. That, again, not an accident. Why is it this car? It was picked. So we definitely are doing stuff here for sure. So the car guns it and right into the mass of people waiting in line. Augie is knocked down in the panic and then immediately tries to shield Janice and her baby from the oncoming car. Once again, just like, look at this incredible man who knows that he's possibly about to die and just almost without thinking tries to, save some people he just met by using his body as a shield.
Yeah, it's interestingly written because it's almost like the text acknowledges like there's no way that his body is going to do anything here, but he almost can't stop himself from trying anyway.
Yeah, he's the Rose of Sharon.
Yeah, I love. I don't know. It's like it caused an interesting reaction, I think, in me subjectively, because sometimes I think you do a story beat like this and you actually just make me mad, or you make the reader mad, where it's like, okay, so you like great job, you made me fall in love with the character and then you killed them. I hope you feel good about yourself, asshole.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the reaction I had. I was like, no, I'm just sad. Like I'm sad and I'm mad at this guy and I want to see vengeance be done. And I think I had the exact intended reaction. So I see this as being like a great example of how to do this sort of set up the story and create that sense of tension and desire for justice.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we kill a baby in the first 15 pages of the story, but it is very pointed and focused on, let's make you hate this guy, and then we're gonna get to hang out with the dude that's gonna try to stop him or catch him, rather. I think it really works. I love, speaking of like starting things off with a bang, I guess. I love the way this prologue ends. It says, "There was time to think. I was going to buy Rose of Sharon breakfast. There was time to think. Maybe he'll veer off. That seemed to be their best chance, probably their only chance." He started to raise his head to see if it was happening, and a huge black tire ate up his vision. He felt the woman's hand grip his forearm. He had time to hope the baby was still sleeping. Then time ran out. Just really good stuff, man. Just really good stuff.
And the whole time I was hoping that something would happen, that somehow he would survive, or I also considered, well, maybe she'll survive. Maybe I've got this backward. Maybe he will die successfully saving her somehow.
Yeah.
But it's like, nope, none of that. It's really sad.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, I think it is interesting the way this story does this is we leave this moment, we jump forward in time a year to what we'll only learn later is the lead detective that was on the case, and we only find out like what happened to these people specifically through Brady's letter, right? Like we learn, I think he celebrates the fact that he smushed both this woman and her baby at the same time, and Augie as well, and like it's interesting that like it's kind of indirectly we learn the whole outcome of the full scope of this thing.
Yeah. I did find myself wondering, like, how did he get away exactly? And I guess he just literally drove through and then just kept driving, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think Pete comments on the fact that like everything basically had to go right for the Mercedes killer for him to get away. That like the car didn't get caught, the car didn't stall, like the good German engineering. I think the other thing he says is that, he parked it in a place that normally would be full of employees starting their morning workday, but because of the recession, no one was working, so no one was there. Which I think is more commentary on the like the whole recession and everything that's going on there. Like that. This guy is doing what he's doing and able to operate successfully in what he's doing because of a fundamental failure in our economic system. So,
right.
Yeah. All right, that is the prologue. Let's get into the first technical chapter titled Det Ret, which stands for Detective Retired. By the way, I can't find anywhere that says this is actually the term that's used. Like, obviously there's like retired detectives, but I don't think like this is a normal actual police term that they say Det Ret or anything. I think it's just one of these repeating phrases that King likes so much.
Yeah, and it's got a kind of a staccato sound to it that sticks in your brain.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, somewhat it's the way that Mr. Mercedes chooses to address the letter, which says something about him and his kind of weird the character that he's playing, at least I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's just like he really like it feels coarse to say like det ret, like it's just like it attacks you a little bit. And I think he's that part of what he's trying to do is hit Bill on what's hurting him, which is that he is this retired detective that really doesn't know what to do with his life anymore. So I think that is very functional, and that it's like it doesn't sound good to say det ret.
yeah, right. And emphasizing the retired part of your identity. It's like, you were a detective, but now you're not anymore.
Yeah. All right, so let's meet this protagonist, Matt. We have Kermit William Hodges. Shocking, he goes by his middle name.
Yeah.
Retired police detective. We meet him. Our illustrious introduction to this character is him sitting down in his lazy boy, drinking a beer and watching basically the equivalent of Jerry Springer on TV. Oh, he's also contemplating suicide.
We got tropes, which I think are once again employed perfectly, because we understand why we're doing the tropes. Speaking of the Jerry Springer thing, like I thought it was just literally he's watching Jerry Springer, but King doesn't want to say it. And I don't think it's just King doesn't want to say it. I think there's something very intentional happening by not saying it. I think he's causing us to think about what it actually is, because he describes, Springer, he describes Judge Judy, he describes Dr. Phil, like precisely, leaving no real ambiguity as to what he's talking about, but he doesn't name them. And the thing is, like, we get so used to these tawdry reality show things through repetition and through exposure and awareness that we forget that, like, it's just kind of a monstrous idea that we get our entertainment from. These, debasing things. And he, and the text points out, like, he's just like imbibing this garbage constantly, and like he knows it's not good for him. Which kind of like, it's like, why is he doing it then? It's like, well, he's kind of just trying to run out the clock, and he doesn't really care what he's doing with his time, right?
I mean, he directly compares it to like the fad of bum fights that happened in his city a few years before. Like, it is very clear that he is aware of how terrible this thing is, and I think you're onto something there. I mean, it is very kind of un-King-like to not put the proper nouns on things, right? Like, he tends to do this. He will talk about, it's not you're just drinking a soda, it's you're drinking a Coca-Cola. Like, he tends to put the brand names on his stuff. He always has done that, and I think it's a way of connecting people to the world. Like, this is not like it's not just name brand thing. It's this. It's like we're eating at McDonald's. We're not eating at a fast food joint. He's always done it this way, so it does stick out that he doesn't do it here. And I think the point is, as I think you kind of said, we don't want to indicate the specific shows because we want to kind of show this as like a broad thing. Like, yes, this is probably Jerry Springer, but it could be any. There's like, it could be any show like this, of which there are many. Yes, it is Judge Judy, but it could be any fake law show like this, because there are many. Same with Dr. Phil. Like, there's just this trash TV is specific, but it also is everywhere. And that is the point I think he's trying to make.
Right. It's a whole genre, not just one thing. And that's, and that is a symptom of a sick society, furthermore. Right. Like, I mean, because when you just describe it that way, this is like some kind of Paul Verhoeven background TV show that would be on in RoboCop or whatever, where it's like, it's a parody of how bad society has gotten, but it's like, no, this is true. This is real.
Yeah. Man, not to pat myself on the back or anything, but I never understood the appeal of that shit ever. Like, I just never liked it.
No, I didn't either. But I think that's one interesting choice we're making is we're taking our protagonist, who's really like a heroic and good man, and we're saying he's wasting his time watching this, garbage, right? Which kind of even he thinks is garbage, which makes us ask, like, well, why is he watching it? And that kind of helps us understand where he's at in his life.
Yeah. And I think there's something almost so immediately captivating about this too. Like, King goes into a lot of detail. Like, he describes this Jerry Springer event in great detail. And I think he's doing this because he's wanting to juxtapose the absurdity and the cruelty of this with kind of the brokenness and sadness of Bill. Like, this is a man watching morons fight on TV for some money, and there's a 40-year police detective sitting in a chair holding up his father's gun, thinking about putting it in his mouth and pulling the trigger. And it's like this weird juxtaposition between tones there, I think, is very intentional.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's funny. It's like there's this kind of wounded nobility radiating from him.
Yeah. Like this a good person that's kind of been broken by the world and has decided that he's just going to eat up the shit. Like, I like Hodges eats this diet of full color shit every weekday afternoon, sitting in the lazy boy with his father's gun, the one dad carried as a beat cop, on the table beside him. He always picks it up a few times and looks into the barrel, inspecting that round darkness. Oh, that's so good.
It is. And I have to point out, he's got his father's gun, and his father's gun is a revolver. Come on, man. This is clearly Roland or just some gunslinger, you know?
Yeah.
I don't even think I'm particularly joking there that like, this is the imagery of a gunslinger. It's a man who has his father's gun, who has not forgotten the face of his father, who in fact walks the same path as his father. His father was a gunslinger. He's a gunslinger. This guy's a gunslinger. It's right there.
I agree. Totally.
Yeah.
It's great. I don't know why I hadn't thought of this, but yeah, it's right there. Love it. Yeah. He's interrupted by all these thoughts by the arrival of the mail. And as it turns out, our plot. Because he's got one letter, an actual real letter, Matt. And we learn it is from the Mercedes killer. It turns out before he retired, Bill was a detective on the case and he failed to catch the killer. And now 6 months later into his retirement, the killer is back to gloat. And King makes a choice here, Matt, which is that he allows us to read the Mr. Mercedes letter in its entirety. And then we get to also read it as we watch Bill examine it for clues. And I love this so fucking much. This is so fun. This is like why I love crime fiction sometimes, that like the King is really flexing these crime novel muscles. And it's just, he's so good at it. Like, we get, and again, because we get to meet Brady Hartsfield a little bit later, we get to also like see how much of Bill's deductions about him based on this letter were correct. And it's just so fun. Like, this is just like, I'm sorry I don't have a better word to describe it than fun, but it is. It's just so fun.
Yeah. I was delighted by this. I was so happy because I was, of course, immediately thinking, oh my God, I can't wait to talk about this. It's great. I think just his point of view is very fun and interesting and unique. You know, I don't want this to come off as like, you know, me saying that 11/22/63 was bad or anything, but like I think this is a huge difference between these two books. And it's a jarring contrast, really, because the protagonist of that book, Jake Epping, was like just such a different point of view, such a different voice in his head, and like we kind of made fun of him a lot for kind of being a dope in a lot of situations. Which I think was like, that's part of his character. That's how he's supposed to be. But Bill Hodges is just like this razor sharp, like kind of sardonic, but just like deeply feeling, deeply noble, smart, very, very sharp, very with it. Like, I don't know. He's just a really fun character to be in the head of.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think it's such a great point. Like, 11/22/63 was written 3 years before this novel. Like, it wasn't that much time between these two books, and it does feel completely different. Like, I think King is throwing his voice a little bit here. Like, he's trying to do this specific thing, and so he's exploring it in a slightly different way. And it's not, I think you're right that it is something that's uniquely him, but he's trying to do something different here, and it does feel different.
Yeah.
I want to be clear here, though, that like, yes, I thought this part was so fun. It is like deeply troubling and disturbing reading this actual letter, right? Like, because Brady Hartsfield, the Mercedes killer, is taking such joy in not only the thing that he did, but also in how he's taunting Bill about it. Like, he's so nasty. I hate this guy so much. We'll talk about him more when we get to him, but man, I hate him.
Yeah. Totally.
So he also expresses concern with Bill's mental health. He imagines what Bill's retirement party was going to be like, and we see he kind of nails that exactly. We first think this is perhaps his ability to just kind of read and understand Bill. on a level that perhaps makes him scary as an opponent. But by the end of the chapter, we just see that he has been like obsessively spying on him for months, that he's just been driving by his house. And like the reason why he knows he's perhaps suicidal is not because he read an article about the high rate of suicide amongst retired cops. It's just he saw him pick up a gun and made that conclusion. In fact, like it's enough to make you wonder if maybe he was at the retirement party and that wasn't like an astute collection of retirement party facts from reading detective novels. It was just he hid there and he was there. And so he's just reporting back and trying to sound smart.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was a thought that occurred to me as well. I wouldn't at all be surprised if he were actually there. I think, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but a thought I had was like, there's a crime novel trope where, the killer and the detective are similar to each other, or they're dark mirrors of each other, but it's like in this case, like Hodges actually is this psychologically astute and incisive guy.
Yeah.
But it seems like, Mercedes, I forget his name. Brady, like he just cheats. He's not as smart as he thinks he is, maybe. Although maybe it's too early to say that. So that's not even a prediction. That's just like a thought that I had. But,
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. All right. So Bill very kind of quickly finds himself, after reading this letter the first time, making a decision, Matt. He decides that he is not going to turn this into the police. And it's an interesting call, right, Matt? He's a cop. He's a former cop. You'd think he'd be calling his partner right away and saying, look, I got this thing. He says here in the book that this is because if he does that, he will be playing right into what this guy wants, because turning it in and making it official evidence would inevitably cause it to be leaked to the press, and that would give him the attention he wants. But is that the real reason he did it, Matt?
No.
What do you think it is?
I think he desperately needs to keep being a detective. Mm-hmm. And this is the only way he can do that. If he hands it off to the cops, it's over. The adventure's over immediately. The thing is, though, that I think Mercedes knows that. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep calling him Mercedes. The book's called Mr. Mercedes. Right. What do you want from me? He knows that, right? He's not. So I said he's not as smart as he thinks he is, but he's clearly smart, right? Because he knows if I send this guy the letter, he's not just going to turn it in. He wants to play. We're gonna match wits, him and I. That's the game.
Yeah,
And he's basically right as far as that goes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I get a question for you. I mean, we're not retired yet, but hey, 30 years or so, we'll be right there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I have a very different job than that of a police detective, but I don't think I'm ever going to be like sitting in my lazy boy going, man, really wish I was at work right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I think being a detective is one of these all-consuming jobs that Fair. Like they're thinking about it even when they're not on the job. And so when there just is no work to do anymore, they just like quite literally don't know what to do with themselves. Like they've spent a 40-year career doing one thing all the time, basically. Even when they're off duty, their brain is not off duty. So I get it for this particular thing. But like I agree with you that I don't feel like I particularly have like personal insight into this, because my job has like it can be very intense sometimes, but sometimes not. And so it's not like I wouldn't know what to do with myself if I retired. It's like man, like during COVID I practically was retired.
I mean, and you like your job, but like and if you disagree with me, let me know, but I wouldn't say you define yourself by the work you do. Like it's part of you, but it's not all of you.
Yeah. Like it's more like it's a fun and fulfilling thing that I get to do, but it's not my identity. I agree with that.
I mean, clearly Bill should just start a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Now
that even be like a true crime podcast,
right? I mean, this is my identity, though. Like,
let's be clear here. Yeah. We're gonna be, if we retire from podcasting, I will be sitting on my lazy boy, like watching Stephen King adaptations when I'm 80 and being like, the one that got away.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna be podcasting from beyond the grave, man. You just wait.
I love, Matt, this moment where Bill goes to his window, like kind of paranoid, uh, like drive to see if like, oh, is the Mercedes killer out there? Is he spying on me? And he's like, oh, it's probably that ice cream truck driver. And he just says, oh, I'm being paranoid. That's what he wants. That's what he wants me to do. And then, of course, by the end of this chapter, it's like, nope, you were right. It's an ice cream truck driver.
That was great. That was the one moment in the whole book where I thought there might be something supernatural, something shining going on, but I don't actually think that's what it is. I think it's just irony, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to read too much into it. I kind of agree with you. It's just meant to be ironic and funny. I mean, it does show that like Bill has a very good like kind of nose to some of the stuff that like the it's not only does he say the ice cream man, it's like the first person he says. It's like, oh, that could be the ice cream man over there. And he's just 100% right there. Well, so like,
yeah,
I think perhaps it shows that I think one thing we can say here is that Brady is kind of convinced of his superiority and that he can handle and manage this cop. And I think a lot of the beats in the Bill sections this week are being like, no, this guy's actually like, I think you're underestimating him a little bit, Mr. Hartsfield.
Yeah. And at the very least, his instinct is correct that the guy's watching him.
Yeah.
That's 100%. Like, because he deduces it from just like, yeah, he could have guessed these things, but I bet he didn't. I bet he's watching.
Yeah. The other thing the letter mentions to Bill is if he wants to get a hold of him and discuss this further, he can do it on a website, a social media site called Under Debbie's Blue Umbrella. He's even made him an account for him there. So don't really have anything to do with that right now, but just thought we'd mention it. I can't say, Matt, the title of the chapter that we're covering next week is Under Debbie's Blue Umbrella.
Yeah, it's an interesting sequence of words, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. What does that mean, right?
Yeah. I mean, even, it's funny. You and I kind of grew up. Well, yeah, we grew up in the 90s. We grew up in a very different era of what the internet was. So the idea of a like a sort of purposeless online community is actually something that kind of makes sense to us, but it's just like that kind of thing just kind of doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
In the same form, at least.
No, I think you're right. Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
Bill figures out pretty immediately that Mr. Mercedes, his game here is not just to want attention and to have fun, but he kind of wants Bill to kill himself. And we see immediately that the letter has the opposite effect. It invigorates Bill. Food tastes better. Beer tastes better. He turns off the trash TV. He goes for a walk. He gets a good night's sleep. It's like suddenly this man has a reason to live again. And it has brought him back to life.
Yeah. It makes you happy. It's kind of funny after knowing Bill Hodges for 10 minutes. I already love him and I want him to be happy.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think the danger here, and I think this is something that Brady points out when we get to his part of the chapters, is like, oh yes, this is like you've given yourself basically a temporary lease on life, kind of. It's like, oh, I have a thing to do again, but it hasn't actually solved the problem of like, what is the rest of your life going to be like? And this idea that, oh, he's going to be invigorated now, but eventually the trail will run cold and the fall will be even worse, I think is what he says, when he gets this new opportunity and then isn't able to execute on it.
Yeah, I think that does make us raise our estimation of the villain's intelligence, because it's like, he knew this would serve as a temporary pick-me-up for Bill, but he also expects like that's part of his plan, in other words. So.
Yeah, I mean, not only did he know that, he also knew that Bill would see through the trying to kill himself like purpose of the letter. He knew that he was smart enough to intentionally disguise the way he writes, and he kind of knew that Bill would know that he was going to do that. So, I mean, I think you're right. There is a chance that this guy is not quite as smart as he thinks he is, and that this is not a battle of wits that is even, but he does seem at least reasonably intelligent.
Yeah. I'm not meaning to say that he seems dumb. Certainly, it's just we've seen him make what may have been mistakes already. So
yeah. All right, so he wakes up the next morning, makes himself a big old breakfast, which is another through line through these chapters, Matt, is that, Bill Hodges is not skinny, and he's actually put on some weight since he retired, despite the fact that he hasn't really been enjoying the taste of food or the taste of beer until very, very recently. He's still been throwing them back, and he continues to do so now. Only, he's liking it, but that's not a good turn of events.
Yeah, it's
Let me just fry some eggs and load it with bacon. I'm an old, retired, overweight man. That's not great.
Yeah, I feel like King often gives his characters a sort of a physical dependency of some kind, and I feel like Hodge's dependency is food,
Sure.
and he doesn't seem particularly aware of it either.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder how explicit we're going to be about that. Like, is he going to start like trying to get a hold of his weight at some point in the story, or is this just a character trait?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. All right, so we get to the tearing down of the letter here, Matt. And as someone who spends a great deal of hours each week breaking down writing, isn't it just like really fun to watch someone else break down writing? Which is, of course, a writer writing about someone breaking down writing, which is in and of itself breaking down writing. Okay, I've hurt my brain.
I love it.
I love it too, and it's fun. Like that, Bill is better at this than we are, right? Like just full stop. Like he's really good at this, which of course means that Stephen King is good at this because he wrote the character, which is the way it should be, right? I think Stephen King should start a podcast where he breaks down writing. I think
he should. That would be really enjoyable.
All right. So Matt, I mean, did you love this as much as I did? I'm guessing the answer to that is yes.
Oh yes, I did. I was so happy. This is like, as soon as this part started, I was like, this is going to be the most fun thing ever to talk about, and just the most fun thing ever to read. I mean, there's so many layers of it that are fun. Separately, because like on the one hand, he reads us the whole letter, so we get a chance to kind of think about it and react to it and do our own analysis before Bill Hodges jumps in and uses his giant brain to start analyzing it. I think, and then when he does start analyzing it, you get a chance to kind of feel smart because maybe you thought of some of the things that Bill Hodges thinks of.
Yeah.
Like I figured like, okay, the emphasized bits are an affectation. Like nobody writes that way. And if this guy really does write that way, he's going to be really easy to catch. So
yeah, like where he puts like, you did the audiobook, but he puts things in quotes a lot. He puts phrases in quotes, which is, I think that the audiobook probably read it by like emphasizing the word.
Yeah. So I wasn't sure if it was capitalized or quoted or what have you, but he read it in a way that was very like first of all, just this delightful voice, like sort of voice that he reads it in, but also like very, very stilted and emphasized like that. But then you're like, okay, so like there's a level of camouflage where he's hiding his real speech patterns. That's basically meant to be caught, and we learn later like Brady totally did know that Hodges wouldn't be fooled by it, but it's meant to obscure like, well, maybe there's less elements of there's less obvious camouflage. Like, so for example, Hodges points out that he uses numerals instead of words for numbers, right? And it's like, well, maybe that's also a little bit of misdirection, or maybe that's an actual tick that this guy has. You can't really be sure. And so then you're like, then you start kind of thinking and analyzing, and I just find this so fun. This is some of my favorite. Like, I think it's worth saying explicitly, like, this is often the reason why people love detective novels is you're sort of posed with a puzzle, and there's an implication that you should be able to figure it out, right? So you're thinking through, like, and this is before we've met the killer, so we're like, okay, what does this tell us exactly?
Yeah. Did you catch the perp?
No, because it wasn't like articulated enough in the audiobook, but
yeah, I mean, I was reading and I didn't catch it when I first read this either, so I don't think you have to feel bad about that.
Okay.
The first question Bill has to ask himself, though, is this real? Like, is it from the real guy that did the murders? And I think once again, this is where we kind of have an advantage in our character, because like, okay, we don't know for a fact that it's real yet. We only learn that a little bit later, but still, we do know we're like reading a story. So while it's possible that the inciting incident of a crime story is a fake letter from the not killer, come on. Come on.
Yeah, that would be a real subverting of expectations.
Yeah. So essentially we know it's real, but we get to see how Bill kind of successfully makes the determination that it's real. In this case, he uses knowledge that Brady like only the killer and the police would know, stuff that they didn't specifically release publicly, which is that the guy must have been wearing a hairnet. I think is the clown mask kept secret too as well? Is both the hairnet and the clown mask? Or?
I don't recall exactly.
Yeah. But essentially stuff that only the killer himself would know, which of course, knowing Brady, definitely sprinkled that stuff in there on purpose to just because he knew he was going to be searching for validity and wanted to prove it was him. So that's all there. So he basically very quickly determines that, yes, this is a letter from the real killer. And then he moves on from there. And as you said, he pretty quickly makes the determination that, oh yeah, this language is so specific and so much in affect that it's clearly a person actively trying to disguise their own language to throw their voice. I love the things he points out here: one sentence paragraphs, capitalized phrases, phrases in quotation marks, fancy phrases, unusual words, exclamation points, all these little things that are trying to obfuscate, how he really talks and writes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very fun. Very, very cool stuff about the clown mask. I don't think this was in the script anywhere else, so I'll just mention it here, is to say that the clown mask is described as looking a lot like Pennywise.
Oh yeah, they specifically say, yes, it looks like Pennywise the clown from that TV movie in the 90s.
Right. So specifically that specific version of Pennywise, right? I don't even know if they say the word Pennywise or if they just say the clown from that.
He does.
Stephen King. Oh, okay.
No, they say Pennywise. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, it's our obligation as part of the format of the show is to point these things out. But I don't know that we're doing anything supernatural here. I mean, once again, King has given us a situation where we could talk for an hour about the implications of Pennywise being a thing in the story, but actually we don't need to because we've essentially already resolved this.
Yes. I am glad you have said that because I don't want to do that.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, the cool thing, Matt, is we get to see that he decides that the killer is probably tech savvy, which we learn is absolutely correct. He's probably young, which we learn is correct. Brady Hartsfield is 28 years old, which we learn he's pretty smart, which is correct. He seems pretty smart. And as we kind of already mentioned, he thinks that there are a couple pieces of information that the killer did not mean to reveal, but did anyway. And that the big one is perp instead of perk, which is like, it's such a small thing to grasp onto, but it is something, right? And that's kind of the work of detecting, is like taking the small thing, the little clue, and working from there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So of course, Matt, the reason this works so well on us is not just because we're learning about the Mercedes killer, but I think you said this already, but I'll just emphasize it again here. It also serves to help us learn about Bill Hodges himself. Like, we get to see through him doing this how good he is at this. We get to learn about him. The thing that he spots almost immediately is the use of incremental repetition in the letter, which, hey, that's a thing that Stephen King himself uses, right?
Uh-huh.
Remember how for like the past 3 years we've just called it that thing that King does where he repeats phrases?
Yeah.
Let's just call it incremental repetition now.
All right. I'm glad we figured that out. Let's go back and edit that into all of our old episodes so we don't sound like complete dumbasses.
Yeah. And so, yeah, the fact that we get to see that he's correct in the deductions that he's making, the fact that we get to see these even having the deductions, this all serves to simultaneously teach us about the killer that we're about to meet and teach us about the guy who's going to be hunting him. It's just really good fucking stuff, like all around. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I love this stuff.
Mm-hmm. So Bill completes the work, goes for a walk, re-engaging with his neighbors and frankly his life in a way that we're kind of told he hasn't in a while. So this is just good to see, right? He's out and about in the world again. He's doing things. He's talking to people. He's pretending to like his neighbor's terrible coffee. You know, the things that you got to do in life.
Yeah. And it's good that we're kind of getting to know him like as he was before his retirement, because the Bill Hodges that we've known so far in the book is pretty much a sad sack.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not like particularly likable, not particularly unlikable either. Just you're 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 happy to know, like, oh, okay, he's like a nice guy.
Yeah.
We just need to see that side of him, and I think it's
Yeah.
important that we do.
Yeah. I agree. So we haven't talked about the Mercedes Killer's like calling card though, Matt, and I think we should do it here. This kind of sunglassed smiley face with a grimace on it. I've attached an example of one here for you, Matt. It's like the kind of like interesting in a weirdly disturbing way. Like we learned this is the thing he left on the I think on the steering wheel of the car after he ran away. He includes it in the letter here. It's just like, what are you doing, man? It's just weird. It's just weird in a very specific kind of way.
Yeah, right. It's not any standard smiley face like emoji that I've seen before, right?
Yeah, it's almost like specifically created. Like he had to have made his own emoji. And
yeah.
who did that in 2010? Nobody did that.
I know. Well, that's the weirdest thing about this character yet.
All right, so Bill kind of wraps up the day looking over newspaper stories from back when he was still on the case. He uses this to kind of focus his anger, and it just gets him really pissed off about this guy. It leads to him calling up his old partner Pete and inviting him to go out to lunch the next day. He's basically gonna kind of get some information on him on how the Mercedes investigation is going, but still has said nothing about the letter, by the way. Who knows when he will do that, if he ever will.
Right.
We see here that he puts his dad's gun back in the safe, so suicide is apparently forgotten, and he heads to bed. I did want to point out this one thing though, before he goes to sleep is he's sitting in his in his chair watching the 11 o'clock news, and King basically like does like a quick brief rundown of all the bad shit that was happening in 2010. There was the Deepwater Horizon spill. There was that volcano in Iceland, right? That was fucking up air travel. I think this Grim Sleeper serial killer in California is just a thing he made up, but I don't remember that. Do you remember that?
No, but yeah, you don't hear much about serial killers these days.
No. And then of course that the hunt for Osama bin Laden was still going on. You put in the script here, quote, everything sucks, which is essentially exactly what this is doing, right?
Yeah.
You got this guy who's suddenly got a new lease on life. He's watching 11 o'clock news, and everything's bad everywhere.
Yeah.
But he has his goal, and it's like you would think a person suffering from depression, perhaps, and not sure what to do with their life, like this would be a thing that would ultimately destroy him. But it's not. As long as he has a purpose, and a reason, like this bad stuff is not going to specifically get him down.
Yeah, I think you're right. I just also think that one of the things the book is doing is it's showing us this world that actually does suck. We're well acquainted with the economic crisis that's happening, and then we're just like, by the way, here's a machine gun rapid fire of all the other insane stuff that's happening that's just making everything worse for everyone. And I think that's one of the great things about characters like this is like they're kind of standing up, standing in the Stephen King sense of the word against all of this bad stuff that's happening. And it's like this absolutely overwhelming, just impossibly huge wave of darkness, and yet they stand, right. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. That he is going to be this agent of the white in this world of darkness. I like that. Yeah. So Bill, one of the last things he does before he falls asleep is consider bringing his gun to lunch tomorrow, as the lunch he's going to have with Pete is not in a great part of town. Decides against bringing his gun, instead bring his happy slapper, which, by the way, the book just like says that term and then moves on. And we're just like, what? We'll learn later. It's just a sock with ball bearings in it, but just an interesting little moment there. I think the reason I wanted to talk about this though is not because it's wildly significant, but Bill comments on it as like the difference between Pete, an active duty police officer detective, and Bill on what they consider safe, right? Like to Pete, he doesn't even blink about the fact that we're going to go to this place that we always used to go when we were working together. It's not in a great part of town. It might be a little bit dangerous, but we're active duty cops and we're wearing guns. I'm not really worried about it. But suddenly, Bill finds himself as a retired police officer, and it's not as safe of a move of his. Like to just go to this bad part of town, even in the middle of the day, it causes him to kind of pause and think about this. And I think ultimately, after all this is said and done, what we're trying to do here is deliberately draw a line between the debt and the ret of Bill Hodges. Like how is he now different from the person he was when he was an active duty cop and from his partner? I think that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. I may be messing up a detail here, but I thought it was stated that he could carry his gun, but he chooses not to.
Yeah, he has a concealed carry.
Yeah, but which just adds to that sense of distance. Yeah, I think you're totally right. We're emphasizing he's not a detective. He's not even a PI, right?
Yeah,
he's just a retired detective. He's just a retired guy. He has no business doing any of this stuff that he's doing. Beyond being the sort of man who straightens bad pictures in strange motel rooms. He has no official role here.
Yeah. All right. So from here, we cut over to Brady Hartsfield, our killer. Matt Brady is an employee at Discount Electronics, spelled with an X, so you know it's cool.
Yep.
And we meet him listening to his coworker, Freddie Linklater, a large gay woman complaining about an experience she had with a homophobic evangelist. This is a whole interesting interaction here, right? Like Brady is only half listening to her as he's kind of mostly focusing on the letter he sent to the detective. And the text is not very kind to Freddie here. But I think that's fitting because we're seeing her through the eyes of Brady, who is sociopath, psychopath.
Yeah.
Yes, and
right.
All of the above.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty classic psychopath seems like to me. But I don't know. I don't want to jump to conclusions on this guy fully. I mean, that's definitely the vibe you get from the beginning, is he seems like basically we don't know obviously what in his letter was honest and what was an exaggeration and what was misdirection, but the parts of his letter that seemed to have been totally honest was just like he really just enjoys hurting people. It's like one of the only things that makes him feel anything. He gets a rush out of it. He doesn't really feel much of anything except like low grade hate for other people, like all of the time, like 100% of the time. but when he can hurt someone or kill someone, even better, he actually gets a thrill out of it. And that seems to be accurate.
Well, and even if everything he said in the letter was itself bullshit, the fact that he felt the need to send this letter reveals something about him for sure in a not favorable light. That's just besides the murder part, not favorable light, but like it indicates a core part of his personality that not only did he do this, but he needs to be thought of as the person who did this, and like it probably drove him crazy that people stopped talking about him eventually.
Yeah, I think you're
right. So we'll get into this in a bit here, Matt, but here Brady basically says that Olivia Trelawney, the owner of the Mercedes that Brady stole and did his murders from, has killed herself, and that it seems, or at least according to Brady, that he kind of helped her along in doing that. We don't know anything other than, he talks about that. I think what he says is he used a hammer on her and he would have to use a scalpel to do the same thing on Bill, but that he is taking credit for doing that. So,
yeah, it's interesting because it leaves a big question mark, as you just said there, as to how exactly he did that and what exactly he intends to do with Bill. But it's evocative.
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing that I take away from this, on top of the fact that he's a monster, is just this supreme level of confidence he has on display here. Like, he knows that reaching out to Bill was a risk, but he's just completely confident that he is smarter than Bill and will eventually win. So the risk is minimized, it's mitigated. And one of the reasons is because he's read Nietzsche. When you gaze into the abyss also gazes into you. I am the abyss, old boy. Me. Fucking. Not only is he a monstrous, horrible person, but he's also just kind of a douchebag.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. It landed interestingly because it just makes you think of him as like, oh, this guy's just like dumb isn't quite the right word because it's not like it's a lack of intellect. It's more just like a self-important sort of self-aggrandizing young man power fantasy that has no basis in reality. And it just it kind of tells you, probably a guy who like really, really loves Fight Club for the same reasons that we loved Fight Club when we were 19. But he hasn't moved beyond it, right?
Yeah. No, that's spot on. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a great comparison is Lee Harvey Oswald from the last book we just read, right? Like the text does a lot of work in 11/22/63 to get us to understand why Lee Harvey Oswald is the way he is. And empathize with him a little bit, right? And I'm not saying there will never be a moment in this book that makes us empathize with Brady Hartsfield. I think there's already implications that his mother and his relationship with his mother is complicated. But still, like the point here at the very beginning is this guy sucks in every single way a person can suck. It's just like, oh, he's a murderer, but hey, he's kind of charming. No. No, it's not that.
Yeah.
He's just an asshole.
Right. I mean, that's kind of one of the things I was thinking at the start of this conversation when we were talking about the kinds of detective stories that I prefer. And I was like, I wonder what his, we've introduced him quite early. So there's going to be a story with him. And I'm like, is this going to be a story where I am made to care about his plight to some degree and maybe even like against all better judgment wish that he could get out of the situation he's gotten himself into? Or is this just going to be a situation where I just hate him and I want him to die the whole time? Or, just, I don't know. I don't know what to expect at this point. Yeah,
sure. All right. Well, we'll keep that in mind as we move forward. We also get to meet Anthony Frobisher, who is Brady's boss, who is blaming the downfall of the electronics brick and mortar store on Barack Obama.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Sure. I do appreciate the time to give each of these characters like a thing, even if they're only background setting characters. Like we have this guy, and of course we already talked about his coworker, whose name I'm blanking on now. Freddie. Sorry. So we're defining these characters. These characters are people that are in his life, and we're getting to meet them. I think that the Freddie introduction, is cruel to her, but also says a lot about who she is as a person. It's a very distinct drawing of a character. Like you kind of get her right away. And I think a similar thing with Frobisher here.
Right. I guess that's one thing I'll say is these people were drawn with enough care that I feel like they're going to be recurring characters. It's not like we're just meeting them and then he's going to go somewhere else, right? It's like this is his story. This is the beginning of his story.
Mm-hmm. I loved Brady doesn't reply to this because anything he says might be the wrong thing. Anthony tones Frobisher must not know that Brady hates him, fucking loathes him. Brady hates everybody, including his drunk mother. But it's like the old country song says, no one has to know right now.
Love it. Yeah, it's fun.
All right, so we leave Brady behind with just this little thing we drop here. And that he had killed his brother as a kid. His childhood was him killing his brother. And then this, and his mother covered it up. Why would she not? After all, it had sort of been her idea.
That's horrible. I'm going to guess that his mother expressed mild annoyance at his brother and him being a psychopath decided this meant that he should kill him. And then his mother covered it up because why lose both children when you could save one,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a logical deduction there. I like that.
We'll see.
Yeah. So we move back with Bill as he heads to lunch with his old partner, Pete. Matt King does such a good job here, I think, at establishing the relationship between these two partners. I think you immediately feel the rapport, that these are obviously guys that worked with each other on long hours, that know each other very well, but also can kind of drive each other insane sometimes. I love the beat where Pete manages to correctly guess exactly why Bill has called him out here, right? Like he's written the 4 things he thinks Bill is going to ask him about down on a piece of paper. And Bill, of course, asks those 4 things. But like this is, to complicate this a little bit, sort of true, right? Like Bill says he wants updates on all 4 of these cases, including the Mercedes one. But Pete doesn't know that the Mercedes one is really the only one that he actually cares about. And the others he's just using as a smokescreen. Bill successfully hides it amongst the others. And perhaps it's another way of showing, that Bill is kind of a smarter than average bear. Like if Pete is kind of representative of the average detective, Bill has a little leg up on him, but also maybe is another way of drawing a line between the difference between a detective and a retired detective, and how Bill is perhaps uniquely suited in this post detective role in a way that Pete can't be.
Yeah. I think that's true. I mean, another thing to emphasize in this interaction is that Bill simply doesn't trust his partner enough to just tell him what's up. Like, tell him like, hey, I got this. Let me handle it. It's like he knows that wouldn't work. They don't have the kind of partnership where Bill could expect total confidence from him. They are friends. They work well together. They have a rapport, but they're not like brothers. And to some degree, Bill is manipulating him, right? He's not being straightforward with him, and that's. I think relevant to the interaction and to what we can expect going forward with their characters, like some kind of, I mean, obviously you've planted the seed of deception here, right? So now there's a tension element here of like, well, what happens when his partner finds out that he was dishonest here, right?
Yeah. No, you're right.
So,
especially since he also says this, "You sure about that cake, Billy? You look like you put on a few pounds since I saw you last," which is like both like fuck you and also another establishment of the rapport between them, because like you have to have a certain level of comfort with someone to like be that kind of brutally honest with them like that.
Yeah.
Unless you're just an asshole, which I just don't think Pete is.
Yeah. I think the way Bill takes it is like, yeah, this is out of friendship, I think.
Yeah. So after getting through the other cases, Bill learns from Pete that essentially has nothing new on the Mercedes murder. The case has gone really cold. And then we get into the thing that's actually bothering Bill here. And Matt, this is where I think the book takes an interesting turn here. He poses this as, do you ever wonder about Miss Trelawney? And what we learn here, Matt, is that it turns out that the car that Brady Hartsfield stole had no forced entry. And the conclusion by the police was that Miss Trelawney must have left her keys in the car, a careless mistake that resulted in 8 people dead and many more injured. And they have kind of reasons that it was perhaps part of the guilt she felt for doing that drove her to suicide. Olivia herself insists that she didn't leave the car and the key in the ignition. She did not do that she took it with her. She absolutely insists upon it till the end. But the cops don't believe her. And what's worse, Matt, they don't like her very much. And I think this is the thing that matters the most, is she doesn't seem like a person that's very likable, and they do not like her. And that kind of, I think I wish I had actually pulled the section, but this kind of feedback loop of the harder she insists that she didn't do it, the more they dislike her, which means she is kind of forced to insist even further that she didn't do it, and so they like her even less. And it's this horrible feedback loop that ends up with her killing herself. And I mean, this is. I think I have this very distinct memory of the first time I read this book going, oh, this isn't what I expected. This isn't where I expected the story to go. That this woman took her life. And we know because of Brady, right? But at least partially because of this.
Yeah, I agree that this stuck out to me as unusual, and I wasn't quite sure what we're doing with it yet, because I really got stuck on this line of thought, and this is one of those places where I might be chasing the rabbit down the hole, but I feel like there's something here, because, and maybe you can tell me if I'm just totally off base and I can stop chasing my tail, but like leaving your keys in the car is not a crime. It's just kind of not a thing that you should do, because if you leave your keys in your car, it could be stolen. Like the thing to worry about is that somebody's going to steal your car. The thing to worry about is not somebody's going to steal your car and then plow it into a crowd. Like that's not really a rational worry to have. And so it seems really weird to like hold someone culpable, or even to hold oneself culpable if you leave your keys in your car and then the car is stolen and then the car is used as a weapon. It's like, well, rationally speaking, they could have stolen any car. They were going to do that anyway. They didn't
Yeah.
spontaneously decide, oh, a car with keys in it, I'm going to go kill a bunch of people. Like it's not really your fault in the sort of proximal sense of the word, right? So like really the only reason they want to know whether she left the keys in the car is to eliminate the possibility that the guy jimmied his way into the car.
Mm-hmm.
And so like it's almost just like this minor formality that blows up into this big thing because she's so stubborn about it. And like her stubbornness is the thing that sticks out to them. It's not even like her guilt, it's like her stubbornness.
Yeah.
And so like that's the thing that I think sticks out to me is like it's weird because it's like, okay, just confess, right? Like just admit it. Like it's not your insistence and stubbornness here is actually weird. And it just draws your attention. It draws your attention as like a weird inconsistency. And like one thought that occurred to me is like, well, it does open up the possibility that like, maybe somebody she knows asked her to leave her key in the car and she did it for them. And then this happened and now she's covering for someone.
Sure.
But it's like, that's the kind of place your head goes, even though we really have no specific thing to draw our attention to that as a possibility. You're just trying to figure out some explanation for it. So you're grasping for things.
Yeah. No, I like that. The other kind of side of it I see as well is, the police, especially as they continue to not have any leads in this thing, are kind of desperately looking for someone to blame.
Mm-hmm.
They can't find the person actually responsible. And so you have a woman who, is not the one that drove the car, but is the one that essentially handed the weapon off to the murderer in their mind. And so, they just really want her to admit that she's responsible. Like I love this line here. Like it says, that was about a month before the Trelawney woman swallowed the pills, maybe less. And nobody on the Mercedes killer case had given much of a shit. To them and him, Mrs. T had been a self-pitying rich lady who refused to accept her part in what had happened. So that's like, they just want her to admit that she has some culpability, even if it's a small amount. And the fact that she won't do that drives them insane, which pisses them off, which drives her insane. And yeah, it's just this horrible feedback loop caused by, perhaps a woman not willing to admit, not being able to deal with the fact that she has something to play in this, and them kind of flabbergasted as to why she would not. And suddenly in this, we have Bill going like, well, maybe she was telling the truth, right? Like opening this idea of like, maybe we jumped to this conclusion too fast. Maybe we judged her as guilty of this thing prematurely. And we don't know whether that's true or not. I will say, just as a point of comparison, like the thing that made me think about this, and the reason why I kind of focused in the prologue about the woman Janice so much is here's another woman who's standing there immediately judged for some perceived slight that she's done by bringing her child. And turns out the truth of that is a lot more complicated. So maybe we're doing something similar here with Trelawney. Maybe we're trying to draw a picture of the way we kind of judge people and how that can turn into something not good. Yeah.
I think you're right on there. The one contrast between those characters, which I think is just as intentional as the comparison, is that while Rose of Sharon is apologetic, says, I would apologize for the Challenger disaster if I could. I would apologize for Barry Bonds taking steroids. Trelawney won't even apologize for her like minor and incidental role in this horrible thing that she does have this small shred of culpability. She won't even accept that, and that's what kind of drives them crazy. So there's this, I mean, both things are great, right? Like the idea of people blaming, and then the idea of whether the person accepts or rejects the degree of culpability they have is really interesting.
That's so good. I remember like the apology thing like standing out to me as like, well, what are we doing with that? Like her just like this kind of throwaway line about her I apologize for 9/11. Well, and I do. I think we're creating contrast there because you're absolutely right. The Trelawney doesn't apologize for anything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So Bill, after Pete basically leaves saying that he gets a call on the phone, but he basically leaves more convinced than ever that they read that situation completely right. He doesn't even want to listen to Bill like shed some doubt on if that situation played out that way. And to be fair to him, like, how would that work, right? Like, the thing that they know, look at the facts here, right? They know for a fact that the lock was not jimmied at all. Like you, with a car like this, basically the mechanic says you couldn't have done that without leaving some sign of it. They know that the car was found abandoned, locked, that what Brady did as he left the car was take out the fob and hit lock on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they know that she definitely had two sets of keys, but is only claiming she only ever had one key. They know that for certain. So yeah, I mean, like to be as fair to Pete as possible seems like what this is all leading to is that she just left her keys in her car, right? That's it. That she just did that. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, he flashes back to the first interview they have with Trelawney, and this is more like detective shit that I love, Matt. Just like the way detectives go in, kind of with the thing that they really want to get to, the thing that they want to talk about is the key, and they don't want to immediately alert the person they're interviewing that, like, hey, you left your keys in your car and caused this whole thing, but they need to like get it from the side, kind of. And the way it's done here is so wonderfully, like, I love this. Must have been quite the struggle getting all that out of your car, Pete said. 3 boxes of takeout, your purse, and the key. Hodges said, don't forget that, Pete. Like, I just love it. It's kind of like they're kind of being assholes to her, but like,
yeah,
it's just really, really good.
Yeah, I agree. It's that's some of the fun stuff in the interrogation, right? The interrogation is always the bread and butter of a detective story.
Yeah, and then when Pete realizes he's got her, right, when he's like, so what point did you take your key from your purse again, Miss Trelawney? Again? Why would I? He held the key up, Exhibit A. To lock your car before you entered the building. You did lock it, didn't you? A brief uncertainty flashed in her eyes. They both saw it. Then it was gone. Of course I did. It's just, that's perfect.
Yeah. I really also love the repeating motif where he's comparing this to the idea of like the guy who runs over a kid and just like insists even to himself that it was a dog or an animal. And it's like you like the way you deceive yourself. And that's part of the question here is like, is she deceiving herself? Is she actively lying? Does she just not remember and she's kind of putting her finger on the scale of memory and like decide like not quite lying but not quite being honest either? You know, you're never really sure entirely.
All right, so what are you thinking at this point? So this is kind of the thing that's been laid out for us. Do you have any additional thoughts on this?
I guess like the thought that keeps popping into my mind is that she's covering for someone, but it's in a way where it would be really embarrassing if she admitted it. So she's like, and it's like, what evidence do I have for that? It's like really nothing other than it's hard to explain why else she would be so insistent about something where it's like, it doesn't even matter. Like, just like, even if you think you did lock the car, just tell them like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. Like that's the truth. When she's just insistent, like, yes, I do remember. I definitely remember. And I definitely locked it. And it's like, okay, well, the only reason you sort of do that is if you're trying to like cover for something.
Sure.
It's just kind of like to step back meta for a second, this whole flashback, and I guess we're going to get to it in a second anyway. So maybe we can I'll just say this here though. Like, it's a real flashback. Like, he is in his head right now. He was sitting at the diner, and then the text and Bill Hodges' mind just zooms away to these conversations he had 1 year ago. And it was funny because while I was reading it, I was like, oh, that was kind of an abrupt transition, but that's fine, I guess. Like, no, it's not bad. It's just an unusually abrupt transition to flashback land. and then we realize like, no, he's just sitting there zoned out.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a fantastic like character thing, that like it's not that it was an abrupt transition in a literary sense, is that his mind just zipped away. I love that.
Yeah, to the point, and for such a length of time that like the hostess from the restaurant has to like come and wake him up essentially.
Yeah.
And just being like, hey man, you okay?
Right.
It is really interesting, and I kind of wanted to talk to you about this briefly because we've gotten to know Bill for a few pages now, and we like him. We see him as a very capable person when he's kind of out of his funk, but like also like objectively from an external perspective, he's an old man. He's fat. He's not healthy, and he just passed out after eating a bunch of spaghetti and a slice of cake at lunchtime.
Uh-huh.
And so, like, I just like this idea of like people look at him and they have this perception, and the ways in which perhaps the way we see him internally don't necessarily match that perception, but also the ways in which, like, I think he is kind of very self-deprecating about it. Like he's aware he's fat, right? Like he's aware of this. He's aware he's not healthy. He doesn't think about like, it's not like he's actively thinking about changing it, but he's just aware that this is part of like, maybe in his mind, like part of being retired now is you're this guy. You're just like the fat, you're the fat cake eating man that falls asleep at lunchtime.
Yeah. You've given up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I find it even more lovable and relatable that he just like hyperfixates on stuff to the extent that he just completely zones out and he's not even like present. I absolutely relate to this. Of, people being like, "Are you okay, man?"
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
I'm just thinking, man.
Yeah, that's great. Before we leave Bill behind for the week, Matt, we have one more thing to talk about. As he walks out of the restaurant, Bill notices a group of hooligans, I guess we'll call them, pestering what looks like a little kid. It turns out they're just mugging him, right? They're just trying to rob him. Mm-hmm. And well, our Bill, our detective, is going to do something about it. I love how King writes this, that this is from the perspective of one of the muggers. Then he sees Hodges ambling into the shadows to join them with his belly leading the way. I just love that.
God, it's so good.
So Matt, Bill walks up to these three people and he takes his happy slapper, which as we said is just a sock filled with ball bearings, and he beats the shit out of these men. I mean, fuck these guys. They were mugging this kid, but definitely a character statement of who Bill Hodges is, right? Like he's this guy. He's going to walk out of a restaurant, see someone doing no good, and he's going to pull out his sock and beat the shit out of him.
Yeah. So is this sock, this is basically like a sap, right? Like, it's like a homemade sap.
Yeah.
And I just love that it's an Argyle sock and not
so specific.
Yeah, it's so specific, and he didn't buy a sap, he made a sap, and there's something really visceral about whacking somebody in the side of the neck with a sap. That's just like, it just makes me cringe up.
But not on the Adam's apple, because that could actually kill him. He doesn't want to do that.
Yeah,
he's aware enough to know that.
Yes, he's very precise and careful about this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, like this is all for a purpose, right? Like, this is the tone of this book. This is this hard-boiled story, this noir adjacent story. The world kind of sucks. We're in Lowtown right now, which is the bad part of the town they live in, and like really actually bad, right? Like the text is emphasizing this. This is the type of place where in broad daylight, three people are going to mug someone. This is the type of place where the children's playground, they're selling crack there, right? Like this is like. It's not a great place, and here we have this man, this retired detective, is the only one stepping in and stopping crime as he sees it, and he's not a detective anymore. He's just an old fat man with an Argyle sock.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. He's once again, I'm going to probably repeat myself a bunch in this story, but he's being a gunslinger. He's straightening bad pictures that he sees. It's not his business, not his problem, but I like the text says he doesn't even think about it, right? I don't remember the exact language, but it basically is like he didn't even think about it. He just went as soon as he saw something, some kid being bullied. He just went.
Yeah, I mean, the kind interpretation of this is that he's just a good, decent person that needs to help when he sees people. The more cynical interpretation is he's a man desperate to be relevant and matter, and so like he has to do something because he needs to define himself as the person who would do something.
I mean, that's an interesting point. I want to say that both of those things could even be true at the same time.
Yeah, no, true.
And there could be kind of a tension in him between which one is the, central one, because he was giving up, right? He was ready to give up.
Yeah.
So
not anymore.
Yeah.
All right, so we head back with Brady Hartsfield. Yay. I just fucking hate this guy, man. I mean, it's kind of it's fun to hate him because he's so awful.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just a little bit here at the end of the chapter. We get Brady is heading to his second of 2 jobs, and this is the surprise reveal that he was the ice cream man. This is his second job, the ice cream man that drives by.
It's great. I mean, I think you're probably right that he got that job just so he could spy on our hero, but also the idea that he has a second job, I think, does tie into this idea of economic uncertainty, right?
Yeah, I mean, he works in the equivalent of a Circuit City in 2010, so like it's not like his primary job is like this wonderful and secure source of income. So I mean, I think it's fair to say that he's a blue collar worker. Like I don't think it's like he's this secretly rich dude that's just doing this ice cream man job as an excuse to spy. I think he probably could use the money as well. So
yeah, it seems, I mean, yeah, because he's being given these menial tasks by his boss that he hates.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really seem to have much of a reason to tolerate it other than like, yeah, he needs money. He needs the job.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted just to once again point out how terrible this guy is. We get this. He popped his head into the office to say hi to Shirley Orton. Shirley is a fat pig, all too fond of the company product, but he wants to stay on her good side. Brady wants to stay on everybody's good side. Much safer that way. She had a crush on him, and that helps. Shirley, you pretty girlie, he cries, and she blushes all the way up to her hairline of her pimple-studded forehead. Isn't he the best?
Yeah.
He's just so great.
Can't wait to see him be horribly killed.
But this is, I mean, I think it matters that we see, is Brady Hartsfield a psychopath? Seems like it, but he's good at approximating a human being, right? Yeah. Like he is smart enough to know how to manage people, and I'm not sure if everyone finds him charming. I think this woman does for some reason, but he is good at understanding people on a level enough to play the game and blend in.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think matters.
Yeah, right. I mean, we're intentionally giving that impression that people like him rather than like, I mean, to make the Red Dragon comparison again, it's like, now I can't, never mind. Let's not make that comparison because I actually forget how other people perceive him. But regardless, you can say like he thinks that he's hot shit, but everybody else actually would describe him as the creepy guy. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't appear to be the situation here.
Yeah, I wonder like asking Freddie like what she thinks of Brady Hartsfield. Like if she were to find out, like if a cop were to come interview her tomorrow and be like, Brady, no, he would never do something like that. Or would she be like, yeah, that figures. He was always a little weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right, so that is the end of the first 2 chapters of Mr. Mercedes. We did it, Matt. We will be back next week to continue with chapter 3, Under Debbie's Blue Umbrella. Maybe we can perhaps find out what this weird social site is going to be.
Yeah, what's with the umbrella?
I don't know. Why is it blue?
Yeah.
Who's Debbie?
Why are we under it?
Well, it's raining.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
All right, Matt. No discussion question answers to read this week, but we do have a discussion question for y'all next week. I think this is going to be a good one, Matt. So we talked at the beginning of the episode about these kind of 2 different ways of telling a mystery story. Either you know who the killer is or you do not know who the killer is. And I think there are advantages and disadvantages of each. And I was just curious to our listeners out there, which of the 2 methods do you prefer? Do you like it like Mr. Mercedes here, where we know Brady Hartsfield is the one responsible from the very beginning? Or do you like keeping that a mystery and getting the reveal from the detective at the end of the novel? Which is better and why?
Yeah, agree that it would be fun to collect other people's thoughts on this, because there's a wide space of stories there.
I agree.
Yeah.
And then we could take their opinions as our own, and that's called content aggregation.
Yeah, I like being an aggregation.
All right, folks. That's going to do it for us this week. As we said, we continue Mr. Mercedes next week with Under Debbie's Blue Umbrella.
Yeah. Remember, you can reach us via kingslingerspod@gmail.com, or over on Twitter @kingslingerspod, or of course over on the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia. That would be the place to answer the discussion question, or just hang out and have totally separate discussions.
Yeah. And if you would like to come under Matt's pink umbrella, you can head on over to doofmedia.myshopify.com, where there is an umbrella. No, there's not. There's not an umbrella. But maybe there should be.
Maybe there should be an umbrella, a blue umbrella.
There we go. Let's get Under Maddie's Blue Umbrella.
Under Maddie's Blue Umbrella.
Yeah.
And it says it on the umbrella, and I think we got a really good stable of utterly baffling merchandise that we're building out.
I want someone to be drinking the Podcast Me mug while wearing the Propagation of the Time Wave shirt, and under Maddie's Blue Umbrella.
Right.
That says Maddie's Blue Umbrella.
Yeah. The Propagation of the Time Wave shirt doesn't quite exist yet either, but we're gonna get all this. It's gonna all be there. Trust us.
This is a theoretical future in which all these things come true.
Right.
The Time Wave just hasn't propagated that out yet.
That's exactly the problem. You're right. But yes, if you enjoy Kingslingers, please consider supporting us over on patreon.com/doofmedia. We've got a bunch of cool bonus podcasts over there. If you enjoy us talking about these books, you'll enjoy us talking about adaptations and TV shows and so forth.
Yeah. And if you cannot join us on Patreon, that is absolutely okay. You can still help us out by sharing this podcast. This is a new book, and every time we get a new book, we like to say, share, please, because maybe we get some new people joining us when they see a new book that we're covering. So please do that. And please keep those rating and reviews in. We do love when we get those. We appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. And we have one we'd like to read this week, Matt. So we have over from Audible, we have Eric B., who says, "Thank you so much. I have lurked here for so long. I don't want to see another book burned, so it's time for a review." Once again, folks, we were joking about that. Please don't get mad. Thank you so much. I look forward to your discussions every week. Your analysis is insightful and thought-provoking. I now add listening to your Dark Tower episodes on every trip I take to the tower. This podcast has been an amazing tool for me to open up a dialogue and share the Dark Tower with my daughter. She is now a devoted fan. Long days and pleasant nights. Oh boy, that warms my heart. That's great. You've converted her, and I hope you've bonded over the tower.
That's delightful. That makes me very happy to hear.
Yeah. I look at it with envy, as I could never bond with my father over the tower. He refuses to accept that it's the perfect ending, and he just won't. Anyway, I'm good.
It's okay, Scott. You haven't forgotten the face of your father,
but he's forgotten the face of his son.
Oh my God.
All right, folks, we'll see you right back here next week for more Mr. Mercedes, long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.